book club? I mean, I know like a general book club, but what do you guys?
It's like a general book club. We meet once a month,
Okay.
and the members pick the books for like 3 months in advance, and then we have moderators and we have treats, and some of our book club members have gotten very, very creative with the treats that they make to tie into the.
Okay.
Like I can't really talk about the sex criminals cookies.
Cupcakes. There were cupcakes. Cupcakes.
Cupcakes were they?
They were
That's
cupcakes.
Mission Valley, of
With
course.
jelly on
My cupcakes.
Strategically placed jellies.
So the books are graphic novels?
Yes, they're all graphic novels, and it's a very eclectic mix. I would say that the book clubs have read the most probably is Brian K. Vaughan.
Who? No, Brian K. Vaughan, yeah. He's amazing. He's amazing. He's one of my favorites too. He did, what was the book?
Saga.
No, not Saga. The one he did for
Why
us.
the Last
Oh my
Name?
God, no, not
Why the
Why
Last Name?
Ex Machina.
Ex Machina, yeah, that was the one I actually greenlit. Out of all the ones, he pitched that to me at a Korean barbecue place where he was living in New York. He had a meal, he pitched the project, I loved it. And then we kind of ran into some turbulence with that, and just because it was post 9/11, and so it touched on some issues that were a little sensitive at the time, and then also kind of strayed and kind of addressed, it talked a little bit about art. I think there was a crucifix in urine, I believe, or something akin to that, which was very kind of Damien Hirst-like, and there's some sensitivity to kind of pushing the envelope on that. So, yeah. But that's just normal. Anytime you go out and you publish, create your own work or Vertigo type or mature audience type work, you're always going to have those kind of conversations, kind of way, sort of creative upside to, or any sort of upside to a lot of these creative decisions. Are you going to ask questions, or am I derailing it? I'm sorry.
No.
No.
There were going to be some questions. My first question was going to be, since we've been pen pals for the last, I don't know, 6 weeks or so.
Sure.
I
If you
follow
say
you
so.
on Instagram, and you're in Abu Dhabi, and you're with the USO, and then I know that you have 9 kids.
Yeah.
My first question is,
I do it old school, your handwritten letters with like wax seals.
and pigeons. You did, yeah. I was,
Oh.
it was very Games of Thrones-ish.
Brother Sussman has sent me into this.
Yes. My first question to you is, and pardon my language, when the fuck do you sleep?
I met a fan that was narcoleptic. She had a sign that said she was narcoleptic, and I asked, like, what is that? How does that manifest itself? And she said she can fall asleep under like 2 minutes.
Wow.
And I can do the same thing, but I don't consider myself narcoleptic, although I have fallen asleep like driving before. And that was usually, so there's something called aphasic sleep. Do you guys know something like this? Like Benjamin Franklin apparently did it, and Napoleon, apparently it runs in short people, but anyway.
It does?
That wouldn't miss me.
Yeah. So what you do is you basically break up your day, so you have maybe 2 or 3 hours of your main sleep, and then you have like little naps anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day. And if you do that, you can stay up for days, and I can do that for maybe like 10 or 11 days, and that serves me well when I go to work, come home, take a little nap, then work through till, like I'll start drawing at 10 or 11 at night and draw till 4 or 5 in the morning and sleep for a couple hours. And but then what happens towards the end of that, your body does start giving out. And at one point I was at a stop sign on a off ramp from the highway, and had fallen asleep. I mean, my foot was on the brake and everything. And then, so that was a bad sign. And then another sign, I was at a light, and this time I knew, like, wow, I was really tired. I was coming home, right, like 7 o'clock is like the worst sunset. Your body's just shutting down. And so I put the car in the park and just closed my eyes for a second. Then the next thing I know, there was someone knocking on my window, and they were behind me, and they basically thought, I had died. And it's true. And so at that point, I said, I can't keep doing this. So, I can still kind of push my body, and even though I go to bed like around midnight now every day and wake up like 7-ish, I can still, if I have a piece of paper in front of me and a deadline, I can work till 3, 4 in the morning. So, and get by on 3 hours. I don't know. It's just, I feel like that's kind of I've always had that ability, even in high school and college, like term papers, I would just stay up all night and just write out, hammer out 14 pages, in a room. And that allowed me to do those monthly books. I never did a monthly book, a page a day, 20 days in a row. It was like, sing and dance, and like Snoopy, for like 2 weeks, and then just crank for a week and just draw as many pages, and then burn out, rest for a week, goof off for 2 weeks, and then repeat the cycle. So that was kind of when I did X-Men and all the work on Marvel. That was really the cycle I was on.
So you're looking at now, what, 32 years coming to Comic-Con?
32 years, 33rd consecutive Comic-Con. Does anyone beat that? I'm just curious.
No.
I was only beat, I did this panel at Comic-Con in the 90s. I think everyone had me beat on the panel.
Okay,
But everywhere else, people just go like, what? Like, is that possible? Is that even, do they even allow you to do that? Like, yeah, so what's the longest that any of you guys been coming to Comic-Con?
I'm at 28.
28?
Ooh.
22.
2006?
22 years.
22 years?
22?
That's really
Straight.
good.
Well, you were like 4, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
1999, so
Okay.
yeah, 21 years?
Anyone in the 80s? Vince? No, it's impossible.
I have the volunteer shirt you drew, for the volunteers, and I think it was 91 or 92.
Yeah, there was an X-Men shirt in
Yeah.
91,
Yeah, I kind of remember that.
Whoa.
No, I'm telling you right now, there was someone posted this thing on Twitter, and it showed me on a panel with Henry Cavill, Superman, and Grant Morrison, and from 2013. I was like, that looks like a that's like fake news. That's a doctor. I was like, I was never on a panel with Henry Cavill. I would remember that, surely. And Grant Morrison, like, and 2013 is not like a 75th anniversary year or anything like that.
It was the 75th anniversary of Superman.
Was it?
Yeah, because
He was turning 38.
38, yeah, you're right.
Like 75
Were you
is-
awake?
They must have had the date wrong, because was that also the panel that had Jack Larson on, Jimmy Olsen? From
Yeah,
Superman?
it was 2013.
Yeah.
It was because, so I went through my photos, because I have all that, no photos. I'm like, okay, if it's not my photo album, it didn't happen. Right? And then I just Googled Henry Cavill, Superman, JimLee, and it showed up on YouTube, and it's all there. It's like, and I had to watch it, and I was like, I don't remember that. That's me, yeah, I don't remember that. And then there was someone else on the panel I remember talking to, and that kind of sparked the memory.
Yeah.
And so, like, I do kind of vaguely remember that. So there's no
t-shirt.
advantage to coming for 33 years. You don't have 33 years of great memories, because you only really remember probably like 5 years worth of memories. So don't even bother. Just come to 5 years and just give it a break and then renew.
And then come back.
So don't sweat it.
You're talking me out of a job here.
Well, no, there's always there's a finite number of memberships, so someone else will take their spot.
That's right.
So, yeah. Share the love. What? 20-year time memories?
What's your top memories?
My top memories? The first one, 87. It was very different, of course, and it was just all comic book professionals. There's no one else really. So in the evenings, there's only like 1 or 2 events, right?
Mhm.
At most.
There were very few events.
Very
yeah.
few, and that year, I didn't know, it was Jack Kirby's 75th birthday, and someone organized this surprise birthday party, and I'd only been in the industry for 6 or 7 months. Somehow I managed I was at this party, I don't know how I got there. And Jack Kirby was there, and people were kind of talking to him, but he was just kind of standing there, and then at some point, no one was talking to him, so I just lined up to him and started, I don't even know what I said. I was like, blah, 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 blah. It was like Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
I'm sure I said like, oh, I love your work, you meant so much to me, the characters, all that kind of stuff. So that was the first time I got to meet him, and I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. I'm going to do this at every Comic-Con, like something cool like that. And nothing really cool has happened since, but
So in '87, what were you drawing? Were you drawing Punisher then?
Alpha Flight.
Okay.
Flight, yeah, it had just come out. Oh, I don't know if it had come out at that point. Yeah, I think maybe an issue had come out. Because I started in January of '87.
So the process for you, how long was it before, when you started interviewing and showing your work, how long was it before that happened and then you got work?
It felt like a long time, but it was about, wait, hold on, what was it? It started in June, so it was about 5 months.
Wow.
Yeah, so I found out later that that's a short amount of time.
Yeah,
But
it is,
it felt like a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I graduated in college in June. Actually took a month off, traveled around with a buddy of mine, and came back and then I started drawing sample pages. So I started July, August, September, October, November, 5 months. And I was mailing in submissions and I got a lot of rejection letters back, which I posted on Instagram. And people were like, oh, those burn, roasted, and all this. I'm like, no, they just said, like, you need to draw better. You need to fix your hands and work on perspective. I thought it was just very straightforwardly kind of written advice. And so it's generationally, people thought that it was very negative and they would have, been broken by this kind of rejection. And I was like, no, it made me want to try harder, and it made me specifically want to sort of conquer these elements that they felt I was weak in. And then, then I went to a comic shop in St. Louis, this is where I grew up, and there was a guy that, Rick Burkett, who drew like Batman Adventures for DC. He was like the star of St. Louis because he was like working for a big company. Some other people work for independents, and I think he said, like, you really have to meet the editors in person to get work. So I said, okay, all right, good. Like every bit of advice I got, I followed through on, right? And so I opened up a comic, and it's like, all right, I will go to a convention because I've never been to a convention before. And I saw an ad for a convention in New York in late November. It was at the Pennsylvania Hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So one of those, really, yeah. But so I have.
I've been in that.
Yeah. So it's a really rundown place. And
it's still there. So.
Yeah. And I had some roommates that were working on Wall Street, so I stayed with them for the weekend, and I took my portfolio and went to the convention, and I was a little intimidated meeting with editors, so I just went around and talked to, I tried to talk to artists, but they were intimidating too, so I went to inkers. No offense, inkers, anyone who's an inker here. So I started with like Terry Austin, because I was a huge X-Men fan. And then like Elson-Kevich, I remember meeting for the first time. My current art dealer, Albert Moy, was there. I remember meeting him. So it was really all very new, and very pretty crystal clear in my memory. And Terry Austin was very encouraging and positive. He said, like, it looks good. I think you just need to, I was like, what would you want me to fix? Is there anything I can work on? He said, like, there's really nothing specific. I think you just need to draw more to get better. And I didn't understand what he meant then, but I understand it now because I use that same advice and give it out freely to people. But anyway, so I was just kind of wandering around going, okay. And then I saw that the editor I was thinking about talking to was gone. Or the editors had kind of left. It was like lunchtime, and so I thought, like, oh, maybe the opportunity passed. But at least I got to meet some of my childhood heroes and got some feedback. And then all of a sudden, Archie Goodwin was there, this editor, and I knew him because of the caricatures that he drew of himself in the strips. And I saw him talking to another person in the industry, and the person asked him, like, Archie, what are you doing back? Like, I thought you were gone for the day. And Archie said, well, I promised this guy to come back and look at his portfolio. And he's like looking around, because the guy wasn't there, and so I just, it was my opening, right? Like, how can he say no to me, right? I go in like, well, look, Mr. Goodwin, as long as you're waiting, would you mind looking at my work? And I could see instantly in his eyes, like, no, I don't want to, but I trapped him with his with the logic, right? Like, well, look, you said you were coming back here, you were obviously going to show your work to someone, why not just do it then rather than sit around, right? And so he kind of grudgingly kind of flipped through, but he liked the work, and he basically said, look, this looks pretty good. But what do you want to do? Like, what is it that you want to do? And I was like, what do you, like, in my head, I'm like going, what, oh my God, I did not prepare for this. I had no answer. And I said, well, look, why don't you come in Monday and we'll talk then. And so he gave me his card, I think, I'm sure.
Was he with Epic at that point?
Yeah, well, Marvel and
Marvel.
Epic, right? So the whole weekend, I was like, I couldn't sleep because I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't even know what that means. What kind of question is that? Like, it's so open-ended. And I felt like if I didn't have a good answer for that, my whole career would never happen. And so I went into Marvel on Monday. I was ushered in. Of course, my eyes were like this because I'd never been in Marvel or DC. And I get to think, when I was a kid, maybe like 12 or 13, my parents used to drive everywhere for summer vacation. We went to New York City, And I remember going to Times Square, and it was literally Hell's Kitchen, that whole area. It was just all like triple X. Like, so different from it is now.
Yeah.
But I remember telling them, like, can we please drive by 387 South Madison, which was the address for Marvel Comics. And I remember driving down the Stark Street and like looking up, trying to figure out what floor they were on, you know, looking at whatever's in the window. And so I had this kind of image of what Marvel was, and having never seen it. But yeah, so it was really awesome getting there, very intimidating. And he came out, he flipped through it again, said, yeah, pretty much how I remember it. All right, let's have you meet this other editor. And I'm like, wait, don't you want to ask the question? He asked me
You got an
nothing. It
answer.
was like waste of a weekend. So anyway, but he gave the work. He showed the work to another editor named Carl Potts, and he kind of took me under his wing and really taught me the importance of deadlines and how to tell stories, and gave me all these, like, you know, 22 ways to draw panels from all wood, and all these photocopies of you know, books about film, you know, and how to tell story through imagery and angles, and I remembered all that and hold it all dearly except the deadline part of it. That really kind of went in one ear and out the other. At least later, right? For many years, I was pretty good about that.
So Carl Potts was the editor of like Punisher War Journal and
Alpha
stuff
Flight,
like that.
yeah. He brought in a lot of new artists. So he was one of the few editors that drew, and so he could recognize talent, and he knew how to work with people. So he brought in people like Mark Badger, I think, and oh gosh, June Bridgman. Almost all the new artists on for quite a while were coming through his office.
So how did you get on X-Men?
That one, like, you know, I'll tell you, you know, people ask, like, what's the secret to success in comics, and I say, like, 40% work, 40% talent, 40% hard work, maybe it's 30% talent, I don't know. Work and talent is a large part of it, and then there's a small part that's like luck, right, like 10%, and to me, that's where luck played in. I would periodically, maybe once or twice a year, go to the Marvel offices, like, and the X-Men was my favorite comic book of all time growing up as a kid, and so that's what I wanted to do. That was like, everything I was doing at Marvel was towards that objective, and there was Bob Harris, who was the editor of the X-Men office. But Bob was a very fast walker. He would just, you couldn't slow him down, like you couldn't talk to the guy because he would just keep walking while he was talking, and it was hard to manage a conversation. And again, you were kind of intimidated because you're nobody, you're just starting out. But at some point, I worked up the nerve while he was walking by me, like, oh my God, here's my chance, he's coming. And so I was like, oh, you know, so I knew I had to say it fast, and it was literally like, Bob Harris, if you ever need a deadline, I'm pretty good with deadlines, I can make the deadline if you want it, and then he was gone. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know, that didn't go quite as planned, but apparently it worked. Like, his office called me, like, sometime after that, shortly thereafter, and said, hey, there's a fill-in issue of something, do you want to do it? Because in my head, I know logically, like, yeah, they'll call you if they think you can do a good job. Like, they like your work. You know, we'll call you, don't, you know, we'll call you, you don't call us, kind of thing. But it did kind of pay off to kind of just put that notion in his head. I should tell the story like it was a Jedi mind trick. Like, you know, like, Bob Harris, I'm the artist you're looking for, right? And, but yeah, so, and then once I did that single issue, it's weird because like back then there was no internet, so they had no way of telling whether the fans would like it or not. And I think it was pretty much what they liked. And then when the books came out, they'd get mail, and they would kind of base it on the amount of mail they got. And so it was a really good reaction to that first issue, and then they offered me a 3-part story, and then based on that, they gave me the regular book.
Was Claremont writing it?
Yes,
then?
yes.
Yeah.
All those issues.
And then you got what they used to call the adjectiveless X-Men book.
Yeah, that was 1991.
Which was the best-selling comic for a long time.
Yeah, we sold I think 8 million copies of that book. Yeah. But it was 75 cents, so you know, if you do the math, like something like, I don't know, like 5 million copies at 75 cents, and a couple million at $1.25 or $1.50 or something like that.
So there were 6 different covers?
I made like $58 off that. I was like, wait, They're 75 cents, kid. No.
So there were like 6 different covers for that. What?
4 covers plus a special edition of all the covers that kind of fold out.
Yeah. So what was it like working for Marvel in that period? Because it was like a time when all these artists exploded.
Yeah, it was like, the proverbial dream come true. This is, I was a DC fan when I was really young, and then when I got older, the Marvel characters spoke to me more just because, they had issues and problems. They felt more like real people. And so, yeah, that's where I wanted to work. And so being there and growing up on Stan's soapbox and the Marvel bullpen and everything, it was like really, I was kind of living that whole experience and just getting to meet all the different editors and kind of doing covers of Transformers and the Numb and just getting to play in that playground was just a really heady time. And then it was also a very competitive kind of environment because, the George Perez's, the John Burns, the Frank Millers, the people that I really look up to as a kid, weren't doing as much monthly work in general. And so there was a void, and people like Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld kind of were of my generation. And we were very friendly, like we would talk to each other all the time, but at the same time we were hyper competitive with one another. And that streak of competitiveness lasted well into Image. I mean, even when we were Image, theoretically one company, we would go to each other's studios and offer, books to each other's, guys. And I think we competed more with one another internally, this internecine warfare, than we did with Marvel and DC. Right. So we got over it.
When you guys started Image together, was it like jumping off a cliff?
Yeah, I think so. But we're young and stupid, so that's the fun part of it, right? I would say that we jumped off a cliff without reading the manual, with no helmet, and we probably hit every bump on the cliffside down, but we still landed on our feet at the bottom, right? So we had no business experience. I had one employee that I hired when I started. And we probably did every stupid thing you could possibly do running a business, but we were not stupid in repeating the mistakes, right? So I think we learned, or at least I learned from every sort of mishap, and quickly learned how to run a publishing company. And so that was a crazy time. I wasn't drawing a lot, but I was working, or at least spending a lot of time in the office.
Do you look at that as your basic training for being the DC publisher now?
Yeah, I think it was like a crazy boot camp version of it, but it was more entrepreneurial. I mean, DC has always been more corporate in that it's a part of a bigger company. It's got a deeper bench. It's got human resources. They've got those little signs in the bathrooms that tell you like wash your hands or if someone chokes. We're like, what? We have to put this up? And there's a lot of stuff. It was more like a family though, like Wildstorm and Homage was really just me, Wilson, Scott at the beginning. And we started out in a 1-bedroom apartment because we didn't want to sign a lease because oh my God, that's a huge commitment to commit to, let's say it was $600 a month, so $7,000 or so. That was a gigantic amount of money for us, right?
Was that La Jolla? I think.
No, it's Mira Mesa, yeah. La Jolla came much later, or the helicopters and the yachts. No, we started at Zapata Road in Mira Mesa, off of Zapata Road, which means shoes in Spanish. I learned that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was a 1-bedroom apartment there. And then it's like, oh my God, we need a fax machine so we can communicate with New York. Oh crap, all right, well, let's split up the cost of the fax machine. All right, it's $12.50 for you, everything we split. And it was like, oh my God, we're spending money because the freelancer mentality is you draw, you send it out, you get paid money, and you hoard that money because that's what you need. And so the idea of investing and paying for something to do your work seemed really kind of counterintuitive and wasteful. So that was a huge decision, buying that fax machine, and then renting that 1-bedroom apartment. And then we were joined by another artist that was friends with, I think, Scott Williams, Joe Chido, who's a painter, and so we added him. So we moved up to a 2-bedroom apartment near the intersection of where the movie theaters are on Mira Mesa and where that Red Lobster is. You know what's out there? It's all by fast food, because that's what we're all. That's the only place we're really. There's a Denny's by 15 in Mira Mesa. Our studio's right up the hill from there. Yeah. So, so then when things got serious, when Image, and this is when I was working on the X-Men, right? So there really was no upside in these investments, right? There was no return on that fax machine, right?
Do you still have it?
Let me think. I had those faxes for a long time because a lot of art was being faxed back and forth, but they fade with sunlight, so they all kind of turn blank over time. But no, and then so when Image started, that's when I actually went and looked at office space in that building. I think it's a law office now, but it's the building just northeast of that intersection of Highway 15 and Mira Mesa. And it was initially 2,000 square feet, and then we went to like 5,000 square feet.
Wow.
And then we moved to La Jolla later, about 7,000 square feet. And then we had another office in PB, and then one in Santa Monica. So at some point, there were 3 offices with about 120 employees that worked for me, and probably about 10,000 square feet of month that we were paying right on.
So you guys were pioneers in kind of computer coloring too, weren't you?
Yeah. First, does anyone remember what an Apple FX? So it was a computer which had a drawing program. You would draw the line, and then you could watch it. So you would draw it, and then you could watch it like in real time. There was a delay. That's what I'm trying to say. It was a challenge, but we did it. I mean, we used really basic computers, and at that time, Steve Olaf was doing coloring, and then there was a Digital Chameleon. So there's really two houses that were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the whole thing about Image Comics is like, we'll thumb your nose, we'll thumb our noses at you, and 2, we can do it better. And so initially the work went through those guys, but eventually we were like, we can do this ourselves. And so we hired people and bought computers and all that. And we didn't do it any better. It was just like weird control thing, I think. And but it also allowed us to turn around and work at, very, very quickly overnight. We got all sorts of printing equipment at that point. So we had a full production company within the company.
So you mentioned Scott Williams earlier. I mean, he's been inking you now for what, 30-some years?
I've been together with Scott longer than either of my 2 wives. So he and I are. Sorry, honey. I don't know if you're here. But I've been with Scott. We've been together since 1989, I think.
And how about Alex Sinclair?
More recently. So Alex was the first colorist I hired at Wellstrom, and he knows the date because I was his first. But I don't know what the I don't know. It wasn't I want to say the 90s, like sometime right around maybe like a year after Image started, something like that. I've worked with Scott for a long time, and the great thing about it is that we've worked so long together that not only can I give him penciling information, right, that's kind of shorthand and he can kind of extrapolate upon it, he will also send me messages and say, hey, dude, do you mind if I fix this arm? Or, hey, this face looks completely whacked, you need to change it. And that's great to have, because a lot of editors can't see it. They don't have the artistic ability, or when you're their boss as a publisher, it might be hard for them to tell you that the work doesn't look perfect, which is usually what I demand. Please tell me it's perfect. You must. And Scott will send me text and say this is wrong. Not often, but he would, and we make those changes, and I'll do the same thing with him and with the coloring. And so it's a very, we're very frank with one another, and so I feel like we're still getting really good work out of one another, that we're not just kind of, coasting through it.
It was really interesting for me to see the genesis of this cover from sketch to, and it was so sketchy at one point that Jim thank God, wrote, this is Hellboy, and this is Superman, and this is Batman.
Yeah.
And to go from that sketch to partially finished pencils to totally finished pencils, if you look in your souvenir book, there is kind of a two-page spread, and then Scott's inks, and of course Alex's coloring. So, I mean, you pretty much answered the question. My question was going to be, what is the nature of a great collaboration?
I think it's that ability to tell each other what you think about the work. It's important. Like, there are times where I get things colored and go like this, like, can you do a completely different take on it? And I send sometimes very extensive notes, and other times like, this is amazing, perfect, you know? But I also will get that information, that kind of feedback from them. Yeah, so I think having that honesty and transparency is super critical to doing the best work. And also those guys, you know, just because I have other responsibilities, a lot of times they're getting the work for me at the last minute, just like on this one, and those guys always, you know, come through, and so they're real miracle workers in that sense, and have really kind of saved my butt many a time on deadlines.
When we were going through approvals, my favorite comment was from Mike Magnola, who said, I'm traveling, I can only look at it on my phone. As long as Hellboy is red, I'm fine. So, moving ahead from the image years, what brought you to the point where you kind of sold Wildstorm to DC?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that were happening. I think it was I started talking to them in 97. The longer story was that I was first approached by Marvel Comics. They had just gone through we had just done that Heroes Reborn thing, I think in 94, 96, 94, 96, 94, I don't know. I've offloaded a lot of information onto the internet, so I figure I could always find out later. Anyway, and in that process, they liked what I did, and ultimately we parted ways, like after the 12 issues that were part of that contract. But the Ron Perlman, who was the billionaire at the time who owned the company, their stock was kind of falling, and so they saw the sales, like, you know, I think Fantastic Four at that time, when we took it over, it was selling 30,000 copies a month, and then we launched it at about 340,000 copies, and even by the 12th issue, maybe we're at like 120, you know, so it dropped, but it was still well above what we started. So they got it in their mind, like, hey, if we were to bring Jim in, what could that potentially do to our stock? You know, because it was very focused on publishing revenue at that time. So they invited me to come to New York, so I flew to New York and met with him and in his offices. Really interesting meeting. Like, you know, he's the guy that owned Revlon at the time, and Coleman Sporting Goods, I think. And
So you left with a canoe and a big bag
a swag bag when I left. No, we didn't pay for the flight either. It was weird. Like,